Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. As always, I am Mike Chisholm. As always, I'm so excited to have conversations with people around the world of men's mental wellness and everything. It's a man podcast, a podcast for guys. We appreciate the women who listen as well. Turns out there's more than we realized. And most of them are women who have men in their lives that might be going through some stuff and they want to help them. That is touching. That sentiment is so touching to me. And I appreciate all the feedback that we're getting as this thing grows more and more. Today's guest we have a fantastic conversation. His name is Brian Sachetta. He is the author of a couple of books called Get Out of Your Head. And Get Out of Your Head, you can go to getoutofyourhead.com and you can look at it. It's exactly what you would think it is. Books that he has written that are essentially journalistic, they're journal type books as he has gone through his life as a software developer and how it's affected his mental health along the way and some of the things that he has done to mitigate that with research. And so there's stories backed by research and awakenings, knowledge that he has had. When you hear our conversation, I believe that you'll be touched by it. I certainly was very thoughtful, very analytical as well. Lots of practical stuff in there. He actually got me talking about my stuff a little bit as my viewpoint of the world. And I monologued on him a little bit just because I was so inspired by the words that he was saying. It's a really beautiful conversation with Brian. Again, the book is called Get Out of Your Head. Actually, he's got two and maybe even a third one coming to make it a trilogy of Get Out of Your Head books. Certainly good food for good thought, as I love to say. I think I even say in the episode. I hope you enjoy my conversation today with Brian Sachetta. Brian, I'm stoked to have you here. Okay, I'm super curious. I'm sorry if you've said this story many times, but to me, it's just charming as all get out. From a computer software type designer to the idea of a mental wellness spot built, Get Out of Your Head, and the idea of linking the two, computer systems, mental health systems, our brain systems, and you've done that. Super curious about that. Welcome to heCast, and I would love to hear how that transformation happened.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, Mike. I'll give probably a story as you said, I've given before, but it's definitely interesting. And I mean, it's part of my background too. So obviously I will find it intriguing is, the way that I frame it is if you do anything for a significant amount of time or many hours on a weekly basis, like eventually, if there are multiple of those fronts, they're going to start to bleed into one another, right? So somebody who is a finance person, but is really big into the gym, they're going to find ways for those two things to overlap, even if they're kind of grasping at straws a little bit, right? And I kind of did the same thing where I'm a software developer by trade, so 40-ish hours a week. For the last 15 years, I've been writing code. I guess funny side note is with AI these days, I don't write as much code, but anyway. And then at the same time, around a decade ago, like I had been working on my own mental health for a while, but around a decade ago, I started thinking about creating content or maybe writing a book or whatever. And as these two avenues started to grow where, okay, I'm solidifying my software development career, and at the same time, I'm putting resources behind my own mental health, my content in the space, my writing, going on podcasts, stuff like that, right? Blogging. All of a sudden, you start to see some parallels, even if they only kind of exist. And I will say, my personalities, I sometimes downplay things, but there are some serious overlaps between software development and mental health. And one of them is sort of the epitome of my writing, or really almost like pillar content, if you will, which is this idea of the state machine. So I'm going to get a little technical for a minute. I think it'll make sense to folks. I'll try to keep it relatively high level, right? So if you are writing software and you want to represent a real world object in your software code, what you do is most of the time, right, or if you're creating a system, you would write this thing called a state machine. And so a state machine has two different definitions. One is the representation in computer code that we're going to talk about. The other is a state machine diagram. And so that would be mapping the different configurations of that object the way that that object gets to and from each of those configurations, as well as how it acts in each of those, right? So kind of a classic example is a gumball machine. You would say, okay, if somebody has not inserted a quarter into the gumball machine, yet somebody tries to turn the crank, it's not going to move states. It's not going to go from no quarter inserted into the intermediary state where a gumball is coming out of the machine, right? So as we start to write our software and we come up with this thing, the state machine diagram or its representation in computer code, we start to see all the ways that that object or that system could function, and then how it's going to move from one state of functioning to another. And as you look at this sort of diagram and this concept in general, you start to see that, look, humans are not computers, obviously, we're not robots, but at the same time, like, we do run algorithms, and there are a finite number of things that we do in our behavior such that we can map those behaviors out in the same way that you might make a state machine diagram. So you could say, right, from a very broad standpoint, you could say, in the context of your mental health, you experience a bunch of different emotional states on a regular basis. You slide between, all of those at some regular cadence. And then also, when you're in each of those states, you act in a certain fashion. And not necessarily you do one thing in particular, but you do a set of things that become indicative of that state. So when it comes to mental health and pulling this all together, what I say to folks is, all right, little fun homework assignment for you is sit down, think about, 5 to 10 emotions that you get into and out of on a regular basis. Think about how you get into those emotions, how you get out of those emotional states, and then also how you act when you're in them. So for me, I think about anxiety and I say to myself, how do I get into anxiety, right? I think too much. I sit down too much. I don't move my body. I sign up for things that scare me, whether they're like speaking events or, going on a job interview or whatever. How do I then act when I'm in anxiety? I overthink. I keep thinking. I spin the wheels in my mind. I visualize, or I try to visualize things too much. I try to rationalize too much and say to myself, this is exactly how this thing is going to play out, right? I'm seeking that certainty. And so,
you're building a narrative.
And a lot of this does happen subconsciously, which can be difficult, but the high level concept remains, which is to say, if you draw that map, if you draw that blueprint and say, this is the way that I get into and out of anxiety and how I act when I'm in it, you're more likely to build that awareness muscle the next time, or at some point in the near future to say, okay, the next time I am anxious, I'm looking down at that map and I'm saying, I'm in it right now because I'm doing all those things that Brian told me to write down. And then from that point, you can say, if I have made that awareness to say I'm in that state, I also have, because of this state machine diagram, the tools that I need to get out of this state. So it's a very broad and high level activity, but it's sort of laying the groundwork for you to be able to manage your emotional states and regulate yourself moving forward.
Okay. That is a phenomenal encapsulation of where you came from and how you came up with this. This exercise and others are in Get Out of Your Head, or either one of the books. They, it's a practical stuff like this, because that's a very practical exercise.
Yeah, actually, both of the two books have the state machine diagram stuff in it. And then there's some, I'd say the first book has more of the computer heavy stuff, but the state machine diagram is in both.
Okay. It's funny. I read a book not that long ago. It's basically a personal development book called Rework. And it's a book where it's about a software company that was going a certain place. And it was talking about the life cycle of their business and where they were moving it to and what the business community tells tech companies are supposed to do and what they decided to do. The byproduct, though, was a book that popped out of it that ends up being sort of a personal development book that many people can enjoy. And it's based on the perspective of these people that built this software company. And it was a byproduct. It was literally a byproduct. It was, success leaves clues, but so too does just life. Life leaves clues. As you're in this role, at what point did you realize some of the clues that it was leaving were things that had to do with, the mental wellness of either yourself or people within within it? Was it shortly after becoming a programmer? Was it being a programmer for a while and involved in different scenarios and realizing that some of these patterns, similar patterns, were in different scenarios as well? What was it that caused you to start moving into the mental health space through your life experiences?
Yeah, I'd say a few questions wrapped up in one there. So
Yeah.
the first one is,
I do that, by the way, just so
that's
you know.
okay.
That's what I do.
So
And
the
you can
first,
choose your own adventure. Choose your own, whichever one you want to answer.
yeah, we can kind of do both because they segue into one another. So I'll start with, what got me into mental health, right? Was,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'll make no bones about it. I struggled super, super hard with anxiety and depression for, close to a decade. And I'm not going to sit here and say like, hey, it's all totally resolved all the time. Like you
No.
kind of get to that point where you have your tools, you have your methodologies, you know that you've been through a lot of stuff in the past. So you build a history and you say, I'm confident that I'll get through this. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easier. It makes it any better to go through, but
Yeah.
you will.
Yeah.
Over that period of time, right? So I'd say that really started in earnest around when I was 17. And then I finally felt as though I was actually making serious progress around the age of 25, 26, that kind of thing. And, the funny thing that I kind of want to touch upon here as I segue into the second part of the question is, it's funny because I think we all have this idea in our heads that, we're going to do a certain number of things. And then all of a sudden, like one day, we get this epiphany and we're like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I'm healed, I'm fixed, whatever. Two things can happen. Well, many, many things can happen, but I'd say the two most likely are either you stack up enough learnings and hard fought battles and wins over time that you eventually hit an epiphany, or it feels like you do. But the epiphany came over 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
The other piece is, and this is option two, is because it takes so long, because it takes 10 years, is by the time you get there, you don't even realize you got there. You don't even realize you changed. And that's a
Wow.
kind of a mind-blowing thing,
It really is. We talk about, it's funny when my wife at the time and her and the founders of Joel and the founders of He Changed It brought the company into existence. One of the things that they were looking at were the pain points that men go through and have, and loneliness was one of them. That was one of the top ones, but the other top one was a lack of purpose. And it's funny, you talk about how many guys out there are playing. We use this example on the show all the time, but you're a new set of ears, and I think a very interesting set of ears to talk about this, because I think you're kind of touching on this. How many guys out there are in their late 30s, early 40s? I just turned 50. I can tell you that a lot of my peers certainly feel this way, where we're told to connect the dots, and the dots are maybe in its education, get a good job, buy the house, get a spouse in the family and all that. And as you connect the dots, as you say, that's when the epiphany will be revealed, and that's when purpose will be revealed. But until then, the journey of what I'm supposed to do is my purpose. And then we get to a certain age and we realize, oh God, that wasn't our purpose at all. That was just a series of things that I was doing. And I really haven't done a lot of this introspective work to even know what my real, if you want to call it a purpose or calling, might be. And to break that down into sort of a logical, if you want to call it an algorithm, whatever it is, to kind of analyze that and come at it from this perspective, is one that I've had a lot of conversations about this with people. I've never really heard it explained that way. You almost make it sound like there is a portion of that's predictable.
I think there is, to a degree, but everybody's journey is different, and I think that on the purpose front, right, again, like we get sold these big bills of goods to say, go out, find your massive purpose, change the world, whatever. And almost as if like another one of those things of like the arrival fallacy of, hey, you're going to get to this place one day and you're going to be happy, right?
Yes.
And I think it just gets misconstrued in many different ways because, people then say, oh, well, it's not the destination. It's not the destination, it's the journey. And, happiness is in the present and whatnot. It's like, that is all true, but it's a little foggy, and what it really boils down to in brass tacks is find ways to do things that you enjoy, that infuse energy into your day. And then at some point, you will look around and you'll be like, I'm just doing fun things. I'm not thinking twice about it. Yes, I may get up and I may go to work and I might work hard, but it doesn't feel like work because I'm pulled to it. I'm pulled to it naturally, and it's just exciting, right? And that is really where you want to be. It's just hard to get there because there's so many different obstacles. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure most people are listening and being like, well, that's great. I'll find exciting stuff to do. But guess what? I got a kid and I'm, changing diapers and I'm paying the mortgage and my boss is a jerk and whatever. It's hard, man. Like, life is hard. I'm not going to deny that. I think the main thing is just kind of on this theme of slow progressions is you just start small, right? If you're interested, if you have a passion for a specific thing, you're like, hey, if I'm passionate about mystery books, I don't just sit down and try to write 100 mystery books. I carve out 10 minutes at the end of my day. I read 10 pages and then it builds from there and I see where it goes. And that's kind of the same thing on the purpose front is you're just running little experiments, trying to find that next dose of excitement. And from there, it's like, hey, maybe in 5 to 10 years, I wake up and I'm like, wow, I've been doing a ton of exciting stuff. Almost didn't even realize it because I was so locked in, but it takes time.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate where you're coming from when you say this. There are so many guys right now that get overwhelmed with the idea of what it might even look like to search towards their purpose, and you just bite-sized it in such a beautiful, beautiful way. I think part of that overwhelm that comes to us is the idea that we overthink things, and get out of your head. I mean, that's certainly one of the the key elements is the idea to not overthink, and that's something that we do a lot of the time. I'm curious, at what point in your journey, you say from 17 to 25, there was a journey there. At what point did overthinking become part of the knowledge, your awareness, that was part of the issue?
I'd say kind of right in line, right? It's like almost like punctuated equilibrium in a way where, there are some moments where you have that punctuation and you're like, oh, wow, I'm realizing that this is part of the problem. And then you slowly start to fix it in an unconscious or subconscious way, such that like you don't even necessarily realize all the time that was the problem or that you're making progress on it. I know I can point to a couple specific examples. I remember like it was in college, and one of the stories that I tell at the beginning of my book is, there's a lot of different literature out there, a lot of nonfiction books and whatnot. I was not reading The Secret at the time, but kind of books in that vein, right? The law of attraction and whatnot.
Manifestation, all that. Yep.
Exactly. And I think the challenge with manifestation is it's not to say that it doesn't work or it can't work. It's to say that when it comes to anxiety and when it comes to mental health, there's a real potential pitfall there, which is, okay, so law of attraction is think about what you want, send your wish out into the universe, remain laser focused on it, feel good, feel happy, see that thing happening, and then you're creating that experience internally. And at some point, it's going to get mapped on to the real world and you're going to manifest it, right?
Yep.
Look, I don't know if that's real or not, as in like that might be mumbo jumbo BS, who knows? But what I will say is that the thing I know for sure is that if you experience anxiety and you're going down the path of trying to manifest and visualize and use the law of attraction, those two things don't mix very well because you go to visualize and then there's that nagging voice in your head that says, no, you don't deserve this, or you can't see this, or you can't get it. Or there's just a layer of uncertainty, which is natural because it's like, hey, I want $1 million and I don't have $1 million. So my brain is like, oh, I don't know if you're going to get it, man. Right. And if you keep persevering or trying to persevere through those nagging voices in your head, you're going to create more tension and uncertainty in your body, which breeds more of that anxiety. And then all of a sudden you start getting into a feedback loop where you're like, well, I'm anxious and now I'm anxious that I'm anxious and so on and so forth. And so I guess what I would say, right, to kind of spin this back around is early in college, I started reading books that were geared toward the law of attraction or manifestation and also centered around anxiety avoidance or anxiety management in saying, if you're going to a party, if you're going to a job interview and you don't want to be anxious, picture yourself at the party, picture yourself at the job interview, doing great, being calm and cool and collected and all of that. And just like I said, right, is if you are dealing with anxiety, if you start thinking about those things, let me let you in on a little secret. It's not going to work. You're going to be like, oh, I can't do it. And now I feel bad and all that. Right. So at a certain point after me spinning those wheels for a long, long time, there were a few epiphanies over time to be like, oh my goodness, like, you mean that I don't need to try to brute force through all these negative feelings that I have all the time and good things can just happen even if I don't run these scripts in my mind? Like, wow, that's crazy,
I love that. There's a lot. I want to respond to that a little bit because, in my personal life, and I mean, the people who know me, like I've manifested a lot of cool shit in my life, like a lot. And I know the feeling, like, and it's not always there. Like I can't just, for lack of a better term, manifest the feeling. I can't just pop it into place for it to happen. Like I know the specific feeling. And it's funny, like I was the guy who, and I mean, I'm quite a bit older than you, but when The Secret originally came out, and started to get some notoriety, it wasn't even a book. It was a CD, like it wasn't even a DVD. It was a CD with a video file on it. And then it kind of turned into a DVD that everyone was passing around. And I mean, we're talking like the early aughts. I mean, maybe probably 04, 05 kind of a time. And I had a whole bunch of people in my life come up to me and say, hey, you have to watch this. This is you. And I had no idea what that meant, but I did know like, and I said, well, what do you mean it's me? You're the guy that gets the parking spot. And I was like, I don't know what that means. You're the guy that meets your favorite, whoever, people in your life. I didn't come from money. I didn't come from anything, but I have met a lot of my people that I look up to and whatnot, and can kind of give you probably off the top of my head a dozen examples of crazy things that have happened. And I know how they happened. And it's so funny because I'll hear people talking about how they manifest them. I had a very, like the other podcast I host is the Letterman podcast. I'm a big David Letterman guy. And I happen to be the guy that hosts that show. And I'm, connected to a lot of people who work for the show and all that. Born and raised in Western Canada, never moved from Western Canada. Why am I the guy that does this? I had an experience with him. It was 11 years ago yesterday. And when the experience happened, I wasn't at all surprised about it. It happened. I know I manifested it because I know those feelings were there. And when I see people say they're manifesting things and I hear your description of it, the description that you gave is exactly what a lot of people got when they read The Secret. And it's like, yeah, the $1 million thing, that's not specific enough. That's not the thing. The whole thing is action. You got to, in my mind anyway, when I'm manifesting something, I visualize the big, hairy, audacious goal, whatever that thing might be. In my case, it was David Letterman. If you know anything about Dave, he's a very persnickety guy. It's not easy for people to access that guy. He's very, very private. The way that it happened was months before I was going to New York to go see the show, I visualized that something cool was going to happen. I visualized that, but it wasn't just visualizing specific. It was visualizing, oh man, I want something really magical to happen. And it was, I gave the universe, if you want to call it that, that's how The Secret, folks who like The Secret, that's secret talk right there. I gave the universe the chance to kind of be ready and to be open to doing that. But I also put a hell of a lot of action towards it. A hell of a lot of action. And it wasn't anxiety driving at all. I can see how people get anxious, exactly what you said. And I think they missed the point. I called the Ed Sullivan Theater 3-4 times to make sure not only was I going to get good seats, but I was going to get right up front. And here's why. Dave's retiring in a month. I need to, I've been a fan since I was a little kid. I'm coming from Western Canada. Is there any way I can get right up front? I bought a special sport jacket that would be that would pop, and that Dave might be able to see me. And sure enough, he did see me. But not only that, my goal was to get my picture taken behind his desk. That was all the goal was. And I knew that was a doable goal. That was an achievable thing. And so I would I said, hey, when I got to New York, I'm like, hey, can I talk to whoever's doing security that night? Hey, man, like, look, you're one of the people that can actually make it happen where I could get my picture taken behind Dave's desk. That would be crazy. Could you please make that happen for me? So I put forth a tremendous amount of work to make that happen. Now, when Dave called on me and we ended up having a thing, and my picture got taken while we were having the thing, and that picture got put in the New York Times. But it was by a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer. It was like one of the greatest moments of my life outside of my family, and it got immortalized. And I have it sitting on the wall right here, signed by Dave. I could never in a million years have thought that experience was going to happen. In a million years, I couldn't have predicted that. No amount of money. It's a 1 in a trillion shot. They don't let reporters in there during that time. It was only because Dave was retiring and the Times was there covering it that night to do a spread on him. Money doesn't buy that moment for anybody. But that moment, which happened on April 20th of 2015, started in January. And I put a lot of action towards that, but also let it breathe enough that the random, the magic, whatever you want to call it, had room to work. And I don't really talk about this on this show, but the way you brought it up, it's just like I know that there are people listening to this that have read The Secret, or they think about the laws of attraction, and they do it exactly like what you said. And Brian, I've got another half dozen stories that are just as unlikely with other things that have happened in my life. I truly believe manifestation is real. I do think about the parking spot that I'm going to get right in front of the theater, close to when showtime is, and I end up with it. People call it Chisholm luck. But I've been doing that since I was a little kid, and I don't know how I fell into it, but manifestation is to me, it's a real thing, but it's also tremendously misunderstood. And I'm super curious for the reason I kind of went into that story, and I'm sorry for monologuing all over you. I do that, but I did a little bit extra to you right there, and I'm sorry about that. I'm super curious because you come at this from such a strategic, mechanical perspective. And I'm curious, through the learning, getting out of your head, that through the learning and the building of this platform, this franchise that you're building, I'm super curious as to your perspective as to how if there is a brain algorithm for how that works. And I'm super curious about your perspective on that. Because I mean, you're exactly right. If people do it the way that you described it, I think that it is going to induce anxiety. Do you see it happening the other way, the way I described it as well? Do you see the reciprocal?
Yeah, a little bit. And I had kind of said earlier, it's not that I don't think manifestation can work or is a thing. I think it's just dangerous, right? Like for most people, right? Because we go down that path, and the next thing we know, we're doing it the wrong way or whatever, and we're making ourselves miserable. What I believe in is pretty akin to what you said, which is, you have some goal in your mind that you know you can achieve, right? You know you can do it. You're not fighting your demons to be like, could I not? Like, I don't know if I'm capable. You're just like, I'm going to make it happen. And then because of that, you plant it into your subconscious, and that subconscious is then driving you. And kind of back to the piece from 10 minutes ago, is there's an excitement there where you're like, I want to make this thing happen. And that excitement is what pulls you into the action. So when people are like, you don't have to do anything, they make it sound like you can sit on your couch and a $10 million check is going to arrive. No, you have to go take massive action. The difference is that you're going to be excited by it. So even if you're working hard, you're like, I like this no matter what. It's not like it's not grunt work, you know what I mean? And then eventually, I think there might be a little bit of confirmation bias involved as well, where you do have to detach from a specific outcome, right? Because if there is one parking spot and there's a car in it, I don't know what you can do there, right? But if you say, hey, I want a house, I want a car, I want a parking spot, and you keep working and you keep holding on to the idea that you're going to get it, eventually something breaks your way.
I totally agree. I'm grateful to be talking about this. I said this story on one of the recent episodes too. My best friend, I performed I helped perform their wedding a couple of years ago, and I brought this up during the ceremony. And the bottom line is, I was hanging out with my buddy one day, and I knew he was dating this girl, and it was to the point where he was my best friend, and it was to the point where the best friend's ready to tell the other best friend about the girl, it had gotten to that level with them. And he's like, yeah, I got to tell you about Letitia. I'm like, okay, tell me. He goes, and he pulls out a piece of paper and he hands it to me, and it's a list. And on that list, I'm like, dude, this is you. It's a bunch of attributes of a guy. He's like, yeah, she wrote this list down 3 years ago. And I'm like, oh, and it was uncanny. And you talk about the focused mind and what it can do. It's such a powerful thing. So you talk about this, you're programming. When did you start writing? And when you started writing, did you feel like, oh man, like for me, it's podcasting. I'm a financial planner by trade. That's how I make my money. The thing I love about it is the connection with people. That's what I love. I'm good at that. The computers do the paperwork and all that stuff, which I'm grateful for, but it's the connection with my clients that I really, really love. Once I started podcasting, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the flow state. Like I shot 3 of these today. And it's the funnest thing. My other show, it's a delight. I don't care if I make money, doesn't matter. I probably need to change my thinking that way as to how can I put it in a direction where I do make money from it. But that being said, it fulfills me so much. I'm curious, when you were writing code and going through all of this and feeling these certain ways, at what point did you start writing? And did the writing, or the content at least about what you were writing, did that become a flow state for you? And was that something that took the edge off of what could be a very stressful gig?
Yeah, I would actually say that both forms of writing, as in software and manuscripts, became flow state like. And that was really interesting to me. And here's here's the full scope of it is, I would write software and I did enjoy that, but I knew that at the same time, like, I was an anxious kid. And by kid, I mean, like 23, 24, 25, whatever. And even before that, but like I wasn't writing software when I was 15, Yeah. And so I'd be writing software, and though I could get into the flow state and whatnot, like I didn't have a handle on my anxiety. So a lot of the times, like I'd get broken out of my flow state because I'm thinking about something that's making me anxious that, I'm at work, in a perfect world, I would love to not be thinking about this thing. But again, I'm early on my journey. So like I am, and so I sense this tension, and I mean, it's more than that. It's like, I used to be consumed on a daily basis by my anxiety, and at a certain point for everyone, I think anyone who deals with this would be like, you hit that breaking point where you're like, I can't function properly or like in the capacity that I want to. Right. So for me, that anxiety was pulling me out of my work, having me disengage, detach, all of that. And I didn't necessarily look at it specifically to say, I need to get a grip on my anxiety so I can become a better software developer. I said, like, I got to get a grip on my anxiety, 1, to live a better life. And 2, for me, a lot of the anxiety early on was centered around intimate relationships. And I'm like, if I don't figure this out, like I'm never going to have a great relationship,
Right.
So I then started thinking and brainstorming, and my writing process has always tended to be like, go out, live real world experiences, listen to audiobooks, read other books, go to therapy, read journal articles, and just like synthesize as much information as I can from external sources and internal sources, and then start to marry the two things, as in like tell a story about my own struggles and then be like, here's what the literature says about this kind of thing or a specific tactic that I'm bringing in. And so for the first book, I really just like, I committed to just being like, anytime I'm dealing with anxiety or anytime that I learn something about anxiety, I'm going to open up my phone. I'm just going to write it down. And eventually I had so many notes on my phone about anxiety, whether it was stories of my own, struggles of my own, some tactics that I learned that helped, others that didn't. And eventually I was like, oh, I feel as though I've learned a lot on this front and I've made some strides with my anxiety. And then I started talking to people. And, it was kind of one of those things where you don't totally realize like the position that you're in or who you are or whatever, where I remember going out to lunch with a few colleagues and kind of spitballing this idea of, hey, like I want to write this book about anxiety. I have these stories, I have these strategies, whatever. And a bunch of people were like, wait a second, like, how the hell did you come up with all of this? And it's not to toot my own horn. It was more like,
it's a goosebump moment. I got goosebumps listening to you say it. That's a light bulb moment. That's fantastic.
It was more validating than anything. It was like, oh, I was kind of like, one day I could write a book, and they were like, no, I think you could do it now. And so that kind of became my escape hatch to be like, look, I know that I know that I can get into the flow state with software development, but I know that when I'm, processing my own thoughts and emotions, it's easier to get to a spot of catharsis where you're like working through all these things and you're like, that makes sense. And so for me, the writing wasn't just flow state, it was also my own therapy. And eventually it was like, okay, yep, I'm working on the manuscript, I'm making things happen. I'm also, it's helping me at the same time. And then, I'm starting to see reciprocal effects in each domain to be like, okay, my anxiety is a little bit better. Guess what? Like, I'm not pulled out of my work all day, every day by my anxiety. I'm able to write software. And all of a sudden, the software is becoming a bit more therapeutic because that's good and fun work as well. And so it just get this ping pong effect. And then eventually, was able to publish my first book. And from there, it's kind of just continued of new stories, new battles, new insights, write about them, publish them, go on podcasts, that kind of thing. But it's definitely, it's work that is therapeutic for me, and it's also very meaningful for me to come on, have these conversations, share insights with folks like yourself, and then audiences, hearing from other folks to be like, hey, that was really helpful or impactful. Like, that's why you get into this kind of thing in the first place.
My God, very, very, very well articulated. You can tell you've done a few of these here, but at the same time, I feel like every time you talk about these things, it's not rhetoric, it's coming right from your heart, and it's in this very moment. You're very present, and I appreciate hearing that. There's a whole bunch of stuff there that's very, there's so much stuff there that could be responded to. The first one being, I mean, I can't tell you how many people that we've had on, life coaches, psychologists, counselors who talk about the power of journaling. And I mean, it's very accessible to a few. Most people, it's not necessarily a natural progression to go into journaling, right? The idea that you kind of married it to the way that I've got a lot of stand-ups in my life, stand-up comics in my life, and many of them, they carry around, it's their phone, or some of them are old school, and they have to have a tactile, they have to have a pencil and a notepad, and every time they come up with some sort of a premise, they write down 2 or 3 words or whatever, and then that will represent maybe a 2-minute bit, 3-minute bit. It feels like you're kind of marrying that idea every time that you have some sort of awareness of something. You write down some trigger words, and there you go. You got 5 pages, you got a chapter, you got a concept that you can write to. The difference being, the stand-up comic will take that, and then they will make up a whole bunch of stuff around it to try and make it funny. They'll totally bring it into the nonfiction world. With you, it feels like you go kind of the other way. You take how you're feeling about it, and then you dive in and analyze it through the filters of your thoughts and your emotions when it comes to it. I don't know if I nailed it on the head there, but it feels like that's what you're doing. And no wonder the second book is just the sequel to the first book. You could write an entire series of get out of your head books based on, whether it's a year or 6 months or whatever of experiences that you write down, and then you basically journal them out. Do I have it right? First off, do I have it right before I get to the next kind of question?
Yeah, it's very close. I do, like you said, I bring the analysis, and then I try to weave in the research to be like, this isn't just stories. It's also, it's credible,
Well, yeah. I mean, and I mean, with he changed it. The idea is that these guys can go and they can go in and they can, leave something that they know, and they can take something that they need. And really, at the end of the day, it's not advice, it's perspective. But the fact is that you take your perspective or your experience, and then you go and you put it through a filter of researched topics like anxiety and things like that. So here's what the experts say. Here's how you can analyze what I went through here and add to that. It's incredibly powerful. I'm very curious what reactions to the book have been, to the first book specifically, because you never forget your first, right? I'm curious as to what some of the reactions were, and if people took different lessons from experiences that taught you a certain lesson. Do people read that experience and take different lessons out of it, or is it more oh my gosh, I'm not alone, and you're seeing people who have commonalities? And because I mean, I don't know if there is much better of a feeling of you're not alone when you're in a dark place. That's one of the things that really, really can help people kind of poke their head up and get some hope back. The idea of you're not being alone. I'm certain your book has shown that. So there's a lot there, but again, take your pick.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to zero in on anything specifically, just from the standpoint of, I've been fortunate enough to sell a good amount of books, which means I have a fair amount of reviews. And if you want, right, like every product on Amazon that has 500 reviews has a bunch of 5 stars, fewer 4 stars, fewer 3 stars, fewer 2 stars, fewer 1 stars, right? So, prospect theory would say that the things, the negative things outweigh in sort of absolute benefit or absolute effect.
Oh,
They
I'm
outweigh
certain.
the
Yeah.
positive ones, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes my mind goes to the negative reviews and some of the backlash and stuff like that. But, I try to let those go because I know that's human psychology, So when I overlook those things, I'm like, yeah, I've gotten a lot of messages from readers to say like, wow, like I didn't even realize I've been in my head for so long. I spin the wheels again and again and again, thinking that, and this is one thing that I guess I haven't said yet about the software development piece of things. And also like it just maps well to a lot of people's experiences is, we in society, right, especially white collar work, like, and not necessarily just white collar, but like if you have a job and you get paid half decently well, right,
Hmm.
you are probably being rewarded on a daily basis to use your critical thinking skills. And that's awesome. It's great to put food on the table and all of that. The challenge is that you show up to that job 40 hours a week, maybe even more. A lot of people are working a lot more hours than that.
Hmm.
The challenge is that if you are using your critical thinking skills that often, you're training yourself to stay in that headspace, which can mean that when you're then anxious, you're like, okay, critical thinking skills, here we
Oh boy.
go.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge is anxiety. It's an emotion, if we boil it down to its bare parts, like it is an emotion. And I'm not trying to make light of it in saying that. I'm just saying that it's not something that we can rationalize away. And so for a lot of us, right, really smart people tend to struggle with anxiety because we think it's this problem to be solved. In reality, it's really like a physiological reaction in the body that is trying to protect us, that then activates our mind to get going and be like, oh goodness, like I'm afraid and all these bad things could happen. And the more that we stew on those bad things, the more we feel those negative emotions. So a lot of people that have read my book and responded to me have said like, I didn't realize that was the phenomenon, right? I'm an accountant, I'm a wealth manager, I am a software developer, and I think really hard and deeply and critically. I didn't realize I could give myself permission to not analyze my anxiety in the same way, to not try to solve it.
My man. Oh God, that's poetic, waxing philosophical right there. It's so great because it's so easy. Take it the other way. Look at the reciprocal. When I'm happy, I don't know about everybody who's listening to this or watching this right now, but I think that we're in the same spot. When I'm happy, I don't overthink it ever. I'm just happy and I'm enjoying myself. And if I'm really lucky, I can be aware enough to become present and to even turn off the phone and go, whoa, I want to ride this wave of emotion of how I'm feeling right now. Right. Okay. Well, if anxiety is an emotion, right? And I mean, people talk about I've talked to enough counselors or psychologists to talk about how if it's pain, anxiety, I think, can be a form of pain to people, which can certainly develop into that. You're supposed to sit in it. And I never really understood what that meant. But when you're happy, you sit in it and you just let it exist with you could do the same thing with anxiety. Whereas if instead you started focusing on it and micromanaging it and trying to, it then starts blowing it up in a really, really negative way. If I did that with happiness, I don't think I'd be happy very long. I don't know if you've ever, one of the books that changed my life a while back when I was going through something, it came into my life at exactly the right time. Almost like I manifested it. I don't know. Was a book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And in that book, he talks about, he does a great job. I think within the first 50 pages, he does a great job of teaching people that your brain is not you. You think that it might be because it's the intelligence center of our body and all of that stuff, but it's way more complex than that. And gives 2 or 3 examples of a way that when you're feeling a certain way, you can actually do, I think he calls it in that book, part work. That might be somewhere, another thing that I read or whatever, but you take the brain out and you kind of analyze it and you can almost talk to your brain and say, hey, I see that you're anxious right now. Thank you very much for trying to solve problems that aren't there yet. I appreciate it, but you could separate yourself out from it and detach from the anxiety. Is that something that you've ever you've really, really gone deep on this? Can you detach yourself from your anxiety and kind of defang it a little bit that way?
I appreciate you saying that. I think it depends on the situation. There are times, right, where the anxiety is so big and so painful that you're like, I just got to get out of this. And to sit in it, like, even though I might know intellectually that that could be a good strategy, like a lot of people, myself included, have
Yep.
difficulty with that.
Yep.
You use the word, I believe, like dissociation or dissociate, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
and that is the term that I wanted to say, which is, yeah, you need to get enough distance between you and the problem itself such that you can see it for what it really is.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who, like if you look at meditation in our culture, right? I mean, it's a very ancient practice. It used to be a religious practice, but, or, for many folks, it still is. But I'd
Hmm.
say at this point, pretty secular, and in like the early 2000s, meditation was having this huge boom, and everybody's like, this is going to change your life and solve all your mental health problems and whatever. And I think the wave has kind of come back down a little bit. Not to say that meditation doesn't work, it's to say
Hmm.
that we have probably figured out what meditation is and does at this point. And it's that dissociation piece. It's to be able to sit down with your mind and not say, hey, I'm silencing my mind. It's saying, oh, I'm refamiliarizing myself with the way that my mind and my brain work. And I'm
Yeah.
saying, oh, hey, there you are again. You're doing that thing again. So you're getting that distance and then establishing that pattern recognition to be like, oh, okay, I get what's happening right now. I'm in the middle of an anxious episode. And if I sit down with it and I just kind of close my eyes and I let the thoughts swirl through my mind and I try to let them pass, like people will often say also that it's essentially like not being in traffic. It's like sitting on the side of the road and just watching the cars go by. You're just trying to see what happens there. And so, yeah, with something like meditation, you get that dissociative effect, or you can, to be like, I'm stepping back. I'm understanding the chaos that's going on in my mind. I might not wrangle the chaos, but I will understand it a little bit more. And that's actually really helpful and important.
Well, right there. I mean, the last part of what I'd asked was, are there ways to defang it? That's exactly what's happening at that point. You're taking away a bunch of its momentum, a bunch of its power, and certainly, if you're able to do that, stopping it from growing and stopping it from that continual, the cognitive behavioral therapy people call it that triangle, right? The thoughts, feelings, emotions, actions, all that just start building on each other and growing and growing. You're stopping that process there, and managing it. I really appreciate the fact that you have, kind of stumbled into turning, journaling / research and then writing and putting it out there. Um, have a lot of your colleagues read your book?
I've been in a few different jobs. I've done a lot of consulting over the years, and so
Oh yeah.
depending on the company that I'm in, some companies that are smaller, a lot of folks there, like, especially when the book came out, because it was like, hey, I just released this book. Do people want to read it? I would say more so in the past that was the case.
Yep.
I think it can be tough at times where you're like I work in a corporation, and
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like, I know they encourage that you bring your whole self to work, but I don't know if anybody truly does. I don't know if you
Mm,
truly can, or at least in every workplace, I don't know if you truly can, right? And I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's like, I'm not going to show up and make locker room talk like I would with my best friends. You know what I mean? So
for
I
sure.
don't always necessarily, like, I will say off the cuff sometimes, or offhand, I'll be like, oh yeah, I do writing on the side or doing podcasting or whatever. If people want to take that invitation to talk more about it, I will definitely talk more about it. But like, yeah, I'm not necessarily every day publicizing this thing at work. And some
Sure.
of that too is like, if I worked at a mental health company, I probably would. But it's a different kind of company, a very different kind of company. So I kind of pick my battles there.
I appreciate that answer. Very thoughtful. I know where I was going with it, and as the question came out of my mouth, I knew the intention of the question. But you're exactly right. Tough to be a prophet in your own land. My wife at the time, and I wrote a book a few years ago, and we had gone through something, and we wanted to take that horrible experience that we went through, and we wanted to turn it into something that might help others. It's kind of making the lemonade, as they say. And so I understand exactly what you're talking about. We get some national notoriety with the book and whatnot, but locally, at our, my firm and things like that, not so much. Tough to be a prophet in your own land. I know what I wanted to ask though was, have other programmers or software developers read the book and got, I'm wondering if it's common to folks who are in your industry, some of these feelings that you were feeling. I wonder if there's a lot of commonality for people who do the same job, and if ever reaction to the book, if other people who do something similar have responded to you and go, yeah, okay, I'm with you, I see you, I hear you, or if it is more of a broad based message.
I think, like, so there's kind of two parts of the answer. One is I hear more from people in general that are in white collar jobs that think a lot, right?
Yep.
The
Yep.
second piece is, some of that might be a product of the fact that, like, I don't necessarily market specifically to software developers.
Of
So
course.
if I had, maybe I'm hearing from more of those people. But I think, yeah, the more common thread that I've gotten from folks is the fact that, hey, they're sitting at their desk every day, thinking hard, being anxious, not realizing that there is actually a different path that they could take that might be helpful.
I want to go down that path now, and I want to kind of finish up by directing people as to where they can go and find your writing, not just the books themselves, but like, because you've got a presence. Get Out of Your Head is a brand. It's that you're building, and it's one that I certainly hope that He Changed It links up with. When it comes to men's mental wellness, there's a lot of islands out there, a lot of islands, and a lot of those islands are dudes that are literally just on their own island, not even knowing that there are other islands all the way around them. And our goal is to link up everybody, is to link up, whether it's somebody on their own island or yours who's got you've got a soon to be thriving metropolis on your island, and we want to link up with these, and that creates the awareness where guys can look at their situation and they can look at similar things, again, that you're not alone, sort of a thing, and we can really start moving the needle, and helping, because there's never been a time where we haven't been more. You talk about high level thinking. I mean, my gosh, they say the sum of human knowledge is doubling every 18 months. It used to be every 2,000 years. And now it's so fast. We're responsible for knowing so much so quickly. And this thinking that happens. I mean, no wonder anxiety is all over the place. We're not taught to stop and do exactly what you were talking about here. So really, at the end of the day, I'd love to pick your brain, about guys that are hearing this right now, and maybe they didn't even know. You don't know what you don't know, but there are guys who are hearing this that are resonating with what you're saying. I promise you there are. And it might be specifically, you talk about the idea of being, anxiety around intimate relationships. It might be about the overthinking about everything, and it just turns everything into anxiety, whatever it is. Couple of practical things that we can give to those guys, potentially gateways to what it is that you've written, but also just practical things that guys who are sitting in their truck listening to this right now. Maybe they've, sitting in the parking lot, they stopped 5 minutes ago, but they're in the flow of the conversation right now. I'd love to give something to those guys. What are a couple things that you would throw out there, Brian?
I guess let me just refine the question, which is like,
Please.
What level are we talking about? Low level, in the moment, high level, broad stuff, anything in between?
I love the idea of anything that pops into your head. Again, I am pretty whimsical when it comes to that. Like first, second thing that come through that you think might be helpful, but also just instinctual as well. So I'm open to either. But I also encourage you to refine my questions anytime, because I certainly need that. But no, a guy who might be pausing, going, yeah, that's me. I do fixate. I do, get into that spot. I do overthink. What are some things that you talk about, that you write about, that you have found effective to combat these things?
Yeah, I mean, the things that I wanted to say, now that I have kind of open floor here, right, is
very much so.
You talked about the isolation piece, and I think, it's like social media is kind of a mixed bag, where we can swing the pendulum of like, oh, social media is a cesspool and it's awful and it's so bad. Mm-hmm. And then we can also go and be like, well, you can find people to connect with and share experiences with and all that, right? So I think it's just a very broad spectrum. When you see stuff on social media, if it's like a post or a picture or a caption or whatever, and it's, talking about isolation, like, I think a lot of the times, like, this advice kind of comes off as like sappy and is not always well received. But, I think these conversations are especially important for that topic because like we can sit here and we can like really say how it is, you know? And I think on that front, I would say like, I 100% want to say to folks that like, this is not me and Mike being like, hey, you know, don't be isolated and, you know, go find somebody, whatever, right? It's like, Mike and I have both dealt with this thing, and I'm kind of putting words in Mike's mouth, but he's nodding along, so I assume so. And
yes, very much
like
so.
that to a degree, that is human nature, right? Because like we don't want to be seen as different. We don't want to be, you know, cast aside or judged or anything like that. And so when we're feeling that negative emotion, it's easy and it's second nature for us to just pull ourselves out of society. And then we get into a feedback loop that's not, it's not positive, even though it's called a positive feedback loop, which is just to say you feel bad, you pull yourself out of society, you pull yourself out of society, so you feel worse, and then so you pull yourself out of society even more, and so on and so forth. I would just say, right, is like, take it from somebody who has been there a lot of times. And again, it's not me casting judgment. It's not me looking down on anyone. It's saying like, I'll be there again. I absolutely will, you know? But I know that the isolation, like bad things happen when you are isolated with your own mind in a stale kind of way, right? It's one thing to be like, I'm at work and there's nobody in the office, but I'm working on this project and I'm having a great time. But if you're sitting on your couch ruminating and dwelling on things, that's a bad place to be. Negative emotions are going to arise from there. And you know, I think the thing to take away from that or to think about there is like, it doesn't, you know, you don't solve it with some grand scheme that's like this perfect idealistic thing. Is you just find one person or one tool or application that can help you in that moment. And like we were talking about earlier, it's like those baby steps, right? So like, hey, look, I will be totally honest. I talk to ChatGPT a decent amount. There's another app that I talk to, you know, for my mental health. And I do find those things beneficial. Are they the only tools in my toolkit? No, they're not. But like, if nobody's around and I'm isolated and I know that I need some help, I will talk to those things because they are helpful, right? So build that little bridge and see where it leads. Like maybe you start a conversation with somebody at work, maybe you start a conversation with somebody at home and it blossoms into something. It also might not, but the main thing is don't be stuck in that isolation. A sort of related point is we tend to be very hard on ourselves, especially men with our mental health. And we're like, yeah, those kind of macho narratives of like, men shouldn't have these emotions, stop being a wimp, and so on and so forth. I mean, if you look at the data itself, if you go to the National Institute of Mental Health or anything like that, one of those websites, you will see that not just women, men as well, suffer from anxiety and depression and mood disorders and all of that. And so like that is hard data to be like, I'm not blowing smoke. If you feel isolated and you feel alone and you feel anxious and all of that, there is nothing wrong with you. And I'm not, that's not also not me being like, suck it up or anything like that. It's you're normal. That's life, And so like, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just a matter of going out and using a new approach and seeing where it gets you. And that kind of leads me to the last thing that I wanted to say was like, we also have this notion in society that like, it's important to always be positive. It's important to never experience negative emotions in life. Yeah. And, when you really boil it down, it's like, that's not true. And that's also like putting a lot of pressure on yourself, And if you think about it, it's like life is hard, and it's not to say that it's impossible. It's not to say that it's unwinnable, just that it is difficult. And so the more that you can align with reality, the more harmony you're going to live in, just from a standpoint of being like, I'm not going against the grain. I'm not fighting something and feeling as though there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my life. You're just like, this is how it is. I'm going to keep plodding along and we'll see what happens. So taking all of those things together, I would just say to different men who are listening, and even if there's some women in the crowd, right?
Yep.
Remember that like things can get better. They usually do. It just takes time, going back to the beginning of the conversation and thinking about that extended period over which things change, and then they sometimes get better and you don't always realize it. That can absolutely happen with your mental health as well. So take one step at a time. Remember that things are probably going to get better, and, reach out for help when you need it.
Man, very, very, very well put. You are outstanding communicator. And again, both written and verbal. You are an absolutely amazing communicator, and you've got this gift and this confidence about this, while at the same time, fully embracing the fact that you're not always okay. And I love that you said that, because there's buzzwords that go around. Toxic positivity is kind of the buzzword that happens. The people who believe that the goal is to be happy all the time, not true, not possible. You don't know happiness if you don't know the depths of sorrow. You just don't. Now, the goal, of course, is not to live in the depths of sorrow, but it's a really good barometer, and it's a really good ingredient for gratefulness when you're not there. And gratefulness is another piece of the puzzle. We have so much to be grateful for, but when we're down in that depth of sorrow, many times we're blocked away from that. I just really appreciate the way that you were able to articulate that so succinctly. Brian, if people want to find you, because again, there's the books, but you're also still blogging actively as well, right? You're writing as you go, right?
The blogging has taken a little bit of a hiatus. I apologize for that. I'd love to get back into it. Just been a very busy couple of years. It is on the horizon for sure.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, best place to find me is getoutofyourhead.com, or on social media, on Instagram specifically. The handle is Get Out of Your Head.
That's amazing. And reach out if you if any of this has resonated with you. That's worth the follow right there. It's certainly worth going to the site. The blogs that are there are very, very good. I mean, they don't have to be recent, but the fact is, you write outside of the books as well, and I just appreciate the fact that you do that. And let's just what's next? I'm curious as to what's next for the Get Out of Your Head empire that's building right now. Are you still just enjoying having these conversations with podcast hosts who are willing to kind of get into the depths of it with you and talk about this? I appreciate the fact that you're doing that. Do you have any future projects that you're working on?
I could give you the full roadmap. I just have no idea how long the roadmap is.
I gotcha. But you got stuff going on that you're not done. You ain't done. You ain't got it out of your system yet.
Yeah, I'm kind of positioning myself for let's say a 10th anniversary updated edition of the first book. If time permits, I might do something similar for the second one. And then if time really permits, and this is the longer roadmap, is I think I'm sitting on a stockpile of new content, and that could definitely become the third book. It's just a matter of how much time do I have to dedicate to that? And I will say this is kind of part of the third book, if not the whole third book. But I've been going through some stuff on my own the last few years, mental health related, physical related, and starting to see some progress and some change and seeing how it's all tied together in a sense. And that piece there is, it's been my struggle recently to be I'm an author. I've got 2 books, one on anxiety, one on depression. And man, my anxiety has been so darn bad the last few years. I've started to make some progress. And, I, again, kind of what I said earlier is I don't, at this point, I don't expect it to ever be 100% resolved, but you want to get back to that spot where you're I know what I'm doing. I can manage it, even if it does get a little bit bad. That in a very, very broad nutshell or whatever is the topic of the third book, and just getting deeper than some of the things that I've talked about in the first 2. So.
Well, Brian, I can't tell you, I don't care if it's broad strokes or you're getting specific. The vulnerability is not only appreciated here, but it's very valuable, because you being open to even sharing that and being vulnerable about that right here is going to be good food for good thought, as we like to say, for people who are listening to this and they're in the silent place. They're in the place where they're still trying to figure out where things are at and who that safe place is. Something that you said earlier, I think about self-care. Wouldn't it be amazing if we treat ourselves the way that we treat our best friend? And again, it's that old stereotype. You talk about the stereotype of men. We're trying to take back the phrase, by the way. He changed it. One of the goals that we have, the big, hairy, audacious goals, is to take back the phrase man up. Growing up, I think you and I both had probably similar definitions of what manning up actually is. And it's to basically bury it and just suck it up and just keep going. What we believe manning up should be is, whoa, we're going through something. Let's take it. Let's evaluate it. Let's embrace it and dissipate it. And that's what manning up truly, truly should be. And we're going to try and take that back. You did that today. But, really at the end of the day, the stigma is, for men and many people who have grown up with Apple Maps or Google Maps won't necessarily even understand this. But there used to be a stereotype about men would never ask for directions. We just wouldn't. We'd keep driving around that same old block, looking around, right? Even though the number's not on the building. So we're looking around, and we would not ask and not ask and not ask. The irony is when we stop and ask another man for the directions, the other man is so happy to help and so happy to give. And that's actually an exchange of vulnerability. The man who stops what he's doing to give that information freely and happily to help somebody else out, that's being vulnerable. And the hard part sometimes is asking for that help. Imagine if we always, to ourselves, had the same spirit of the person giving the directions, or we felt towards ourselves the way we would a best friend who confided in us. And if you're going through something out there, I would submit the idea that if you have somebody who you would be there for, maybe you have been there for, that person might be there for you as well. And that might be a good start of the first person you might want to open up to, that you're not alone. But Brian, I can't thank you enough for being on here today. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. Get Out of Your Head is the book. It's the Insta. It's the brand. It's the website. Getoutofyourhead.com. I can't thank you enough for coming on here. And as things advance for you, please stay in touch. Like, these are resources that I think are really valuable. Again, I hope our islands stay connected.
That sounds great, Mike. Great conversation. Thanks for having me. Yeah, let's keep it going.
Awesome. For those who have listened to the show, for those who are actually who are already in He Changed It, in the He Changed It universe, you know that everything that Brian talked about here is exactly what we're trying to achieve with He Changed It, especially the You're Not Alone piece. Boy, I can't think of something that's more in line with what it is that he did. Let's get out of your head. Let's get some action going, whatever that looks like for you. We're cheering you on. You're not alone. If you haven't downloaded the He Changed It app yet, what the heck are you waiting for? Go to hechangeit.com for information and watch this thing scale, as our goal is to change the world. This has been another episode of heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. Go change something.